So this is the second in a series that I've been working on with Andrew Bourbon over at UWL. Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't be here, but he has done a screen capture of his work. Now, the last one I presented in Stockholm was the idea that phase is something that we teach on almost taken for granted level when we start talking to students, in the sense that the amount of times I've sat on a console, flipping a phase button going, "Can you hear that?" And to me, it's like night and day, and to them they're going, "I got nothing, I can't hear that at all." Which has started leading me into the questions of why do we have this kind of binary looking at phase, and Andy and I have been talking about this for a really long time, about what is phase, what is this binary approach that we think of. So let's just break a few things down. Two kinds of phase interference. One is constructive, one is destructive. Once again, looking at these binaries of one helps, one doesn't help, depending on how you look at it. When we record sound, the diaphragms of our microphones essentially replicate the action of our eardrums. So let's just think a little bit about how a microphone catches sound, and we're talking about transverse and longitudinal waves. So when a sound clicks in the atmosphere, it creates a disturbance. Particles bump into each other, creating what we call a longitudinal wave. If anyone's seen science programs with the slinky, that's what we're getting. It hits a microphone which goes backwards, forwards, and then to zero. That then gets translated into electrical energy because it's a magnet. And that gets amplified through impedance processes and, of course, electricity. And it's translated into electrical energy, which we can view as backwards, forwards, and back to zero. And then we see these translated into digital energy when we see them in DAWs. Now, if we use more than one microphone, then our transduction of sound, of physical sound, into electrical energy creates a potential problem, which is one microphone's doing this and one microphone's doing this. Then what does the speaker do? Because the speaker is transducing that electrical energy back into physical energy. So the basic constructive-destructive argument is more constructive means speakers are free of moving. The less constructive means speakers don't move so much. But there are other things. So, within variable degrees of phase, rather than thinking of it as a flip of phase, you could say think 90 degrees of space. 90 degrees of phase can be used to create space. So you can use phase and manipulate phase in very subtle ways. Now, so we say to students, how do you alter a phase relationship? So I think of this phase rotating, there's time delaying, we can do those in post-production. In pre-production, we can move a microphone. In pre-production, we can also alter the phase relationships using equalization. So, for example, if we cut low-end information off, we're dramatically altering the structure of a waveform, which means that those waveforms, so big low cuts, can really influence things that you're working on when you're, say, recording drums, for example. So these are sort of things that I don't have time to talk to students about. So there's a phase choice. And a lot of this comes down to, can't you hear it? Or can you train your ears to hear it? And this is something that really bothers me, because there's this sort of understanding that there is an ear training course for hearing phase. There really isn't. Generally, the way that I did it is I took, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years into my practice as an audio engineer when I finally went, I can hear it. And this comes down to that sort of 10,000 hours of working and training yourself. But how do you make that choice without the years of experience? Because there are some pedagogical challenges when I teach students how to operate a record, like operate the studio. So Lachlan showed you pictures of the studio we work in teaching. These are lovely sounding rooms, so quite often you flip the phase button, it'll still sound nice. What do you do with a floor tom? For example, a floor tom is roughly 90 degrees out of phase. If you flip it, it's 270 degrees out of phase. That's the same level of constructive or destructive interference. So what happens when there is no choice there? How do we explain this to students? My biggest problem personally is I have 4 lessons to teach them everything about studio. And when we start getting our first folios back, everything's out of phase. Generally the snare drum most of the time. So I wanted to start thinking, is there a way that I can inform students of how to deal with this? And I think about, well, there are 2 different ways to think about phase manipulation. The first way is post-production. And we use alignment tools such as M-Auto-Align or Auto-Align, or we use phase rotation tools such as Little Labs IBP, or just, every DAW but Pro Tools has their own phase rotator. and phase flipper on the channel. And then phase adjustment at the recording stage, which is this is the one I personally prefer. So I started looking for tools that work really well. Now this is our traditional sort of Brainworks version where we have our traditional phase scope which points this way for more in phase, this way for less in phase, this way for stereo spread, which is really, I think it's a really good way of looking at phase. And old consoles have needles as well that go around, so you have that sort of advantage if you're familiar with reading this. But my personal favorite is thinking about it in terms of a new paradigm and the 360 degrees of phase rather than binary. So in this case, we have auto-aligned phase display. And I think, personally, I found this to be a great educational tool. The colors here indicate the frequencies. This is a snare drum hit. Up at the top is in phase. That's 90 degrees of phase. That's 180 degrees of phase, 270, and 360, or 0. As well as that, auto-align gives me several indications as to where things are well in phase, and that's sort of 90 degrees of phase, 180 degrees out of phase. So it's a really good way for me to show students how to deal with that. One of my favorite parts about this is then it goes, your microphone's 6.43 centimeters. In terms of its phase relationship, you can get a better one there. What's really cool about this is it gives you like 3 or 4 options. Now, this is a post-production tool. So towards the end of this, Andy's going to do a little bit of a presentation remotely on this post-production tool, but I just wanted to run through that with you. So, drum recording and phase correction. Last year I did a demonstration of this by recording everything in a nice studio, and it worked very well. Like it was a night and day difference as far as I was concerned, and as far as people I spoke to afterwards. But I thought, same as Lachlan, we're teaching them in these lovely rooms on these beautiful consoles where basically you really have to try to screw it up. They still screw it up. But in this case, I was thinking, well, what happens when you're in a really crappy space? Which is pretty much where most people start out their recording. And you're there going, why doesn't my drum sound good? So my plan here is to create a drum setup in an inappropriate area. And I just want to show you how inappropriate this is. This is in my studio, which actually happens to be at a high school. This is the kitchen. As you can see, the microwave was really handy there. This is me just measuring out microphones so that I could keep note of everything I did. Notice the huge glass wall down the side, the concrete walls, the lino on the bottom, a really low ceiling, much lower than this. And of course, using some slightly odd microphone choices on top of the microwave. Just to try and create sort of different bits of character. This is just a little indication as to what I then did. So then I checked everything, made sure it was relatively well in phase, measured it all myself to what I would think it would be good, and it was all relatively well in phase to, I'd say, within that 90 degree area, which is fine. In this case, I then went, all right, well, what are the other things students are afraid of? Aggressive equalization. So I went, well, even myself, I tend to equalize a little bit and then leave a little bit for later, for mixing. In this case, I went, no, bugger it. Like 10 dB boosts, huge, ridiculous cuts, just to try and really do the extreme things and then go, well, what can I do then once I've created these phase problems? Then I can measure it and move the microphones. Lo and behold, after I'd done all the EQing, close mics were actually pretty well in phase after analyzing it, which was surprising to me. But overhead left, right, 17 centimeters closer, 15 centimeters closer. Room PZM, 3 centimeters back. And the room large diaphragm condenser was 17 centimeters closer. So, before we go there, I just want to do a quick demonstration of that. So have a listen to the room sound, like you get that splashy, sort of almost amateurish sound off the glass here. So. I can't tell if that sounds very good on these speakers, so hopefully it's at least not bad. So moving from that, equalize and move positions. Now, I'm going to start with these speakers are not very good. But what I really listen for here is kind of impact and unity in the drum sound. Obviously none of this is mixed, this is all just pretty much faded straight up and everything done quite ridiculously. But the idea here is what can we do to create some sort of unity in our phase? So conclusively, oh, that's right. First, I would argue that phase is a personal choice. Now, I don't mind either of those drum sounds, like the weird room sound that I'm getting out of that is actually kind of all right. But since I've written all of this down, I could always return to that. And I can always make the personal choice for slightly out of phase, creates more space and gets more room interference. So knowing that exact phase relationships are good, kind of what I like to think of is I want to give students the ability to look at what they're doing and think about what they're doing. So the small reflective kitchen had a lot more influence of the sound than the nice studio. The nice studio is easy to get a good sound on. This one, kind of working a lot and you're really fighting the room. The biggest one for me is it turns a 3-person job into a 1-person job. Normally I have myself, an assistant, someone hitting, and then moving microphones around. Whereas this is a case of, here's a measurement, give it a shot, go back in and have a listen. It was surprising how the room has a lot less, obviously listening on much better speakers than this, you'll notice that the room has a lot less influence when things start going in phase, which was surprising to me. And the idea, what I want to do is take away this concept that you show a student Recorder Man and for the next 2 years they're using Recorder Man as their overhead setup. I want students to go, well, how can I be adventurous and make sure everything keeps together? Now, Andrew is going to take you on a walk through what happens when you start thinking differently about phase and you start making choices where you use time shifting to change the reality of the composition.
So I'm just going to talk to you briefly about a recording that I undertook this year using working with the Crosstown Traffic at the University of West London. The recording took place in St Mary's Church, Ealing, which says here very long reverb. A live concert that was recorded.
That's probably me.
And I wanted the ability to manipulate.
Have you finished yet?
After the concert, in order to potentially change the image, change the depth, bring focus, all of these sort of things. It wasn't possible to do correction in the form that Dan's spoken about in the past by pre-measuring and using the tool as part of the measurement because of the inability to place microphones due to the fact that it was a concert. Also, this was designed for 3 delivery formats, which added another set of complications. So it was for traditional stereo, also for immersive binaural, and also for Aura 3D, where you can see we have those 3 layers. So the microphone array that I used was something else that came up with myself, where each of these layers is represented by an array of microphones that start within the ensemble and build out. The ensemble you can see here, costume guards in the church, should give you some idea of the nature of the ensemble and also the nature of the space. So as I say, I tried to capture these 3 levels, had a sound field at a low level that was feeding the lower 7.1, a head height array which was made 4 mics across the front, effectively an AB pair, and then a wider pair, and then also some microphones further back in space on the sides, and then also at the rear of the ensemble to bring some kind of focus, plus a high roof mic. We can see the high roof mic at the top of the picture here, the sound field at the bottom of the picture, and again on the next slide here, we can see that we've got the left of the AB pair. There's a rear left mic, which is right at the back over the percussion there, and a side left mic as a wide cardioid. The stereo recording that we're going to listen to is based primarily on the sort of frontal array. And again, I used the same method that I used for anyone who saw the big band recording from the last conference. So this time, rather than aligning bleed, picked out particular elements of the orchestra I wanted to try and manipulate. So I wanted to try and bring focus to the brass, in particular to sort of bridge the gap between left and right that was being generated in stereo playback. I did this by, first of all, aligning the left and right to try and improve the clarity that we have from those microphones, but it does induce perhaps a sort of slight lack of warmth. And then aligned the side mics to the front mic, and then the back mics to the side mics. So building that kind of ABC design that will be published in the upcoming journal if anyone's interested in reading that. And the key thing here is picking what to align, both in terms of which mics to align to each other, and also which material to make the alignment from. As I say, last time I was focusing on bleed, whereas this time I focused on the loudest parts of a particular frequency range of brass to try and bring clarity to that. And the example I'm going to show you here shows one way that manipulation can work. Actually, it's entirely possible to achieve multiple different changes in perspective with this change in reality as I talk about in the upcoming video. So in this example, we have a file here which has had no phase manipulation in blue, and the green file which has had the phase manipulation. You can follow which one we're playing based on the solo button. And they give us two, what I would describe as alternative realities of the recording. The phase manipulated version that I've done, I think adds focus, adds quality to the centre of the image, as well as adding detail to the timpani, to the horn part that you hear at the very end of this recording. But at the same time, it's lost some of the impact of the space and some of the softness of elements of it. And it's not that one's better than the other, they're just both very different. And actually, through the use of these tools, we can manipulate the sense, that reality in which we're listening to that recording for the end user, with a range of different options, pulling out particular elements. So yeah, I'll play both. We'll have a listen to the transitions between the two. And I think it's important not to see one's better than the other, just to show some of the potential for manipulation that this particular technology allows. I'm sorry I can't play you the immersive binaural versions. I'm obviously not there today. I wasn't able to bring my collection of headphones with me so that you could all experience the impact on the binaural immersive versions.
Totally would have brought that too.
Compared with the stereo version. Here it is, the stereo. I think you hear that, particularly at the end, we've achieved two very different perspectives. Again, it's very much in the hands of the user as to which one of those is the desired choice. I do think it's quite interesting, and actually arguably prefer the unmanipulated version, but again, it's about choice, it's about providing choice, it's not about a correct answer. So where's it going next? It's all about this the 3D representation and also the immersive binaural, but more of that for a future conference.
All right, questions? Yes.
Thank you for that. That was excellent. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, we went down the rabbit hole.
Again. Back to your own drum recording in the kitchen. You mentioned the moves that you made more to the overheads into the room, like large diaphragm condenser. Were you using the Sound Radix timer to do that, or how were you doing that? Did you have a second person moving it while you were listening to?
No. So that's in the first paper. I actually do a full video on how to do it.
Right.
So it's just how. And again, I don't think it's an ideal thing to do as well. I don't think, because I worry a little bit that I'm putting up a concept that in phase is better, which that's not true. And also, I wasn't happy with the drum recording particularly anyway on this, but so this concept that in phase is necessarily better, but the ability to hear it to, I guess, within 20% and really feel those speakers move. So if you go down to like a much larger set of speakers, what actually happened in my first one was I was standing in front of the big Neumann things, and that happened, like physically, my clothes moved.
Sorry, while somebody was moving the mic.
No. This is trying the different versions. So I played the two different versions back, the unmoved and the post moved after I've recorded.
Oh, this is in post production.
Yeah.
You're moving them. Right. Okay. Sorry.
No. You're moving. You record a bit.
I record it, I measure it, then I move it.
Yeah, so he measures it, then he
physically
moves the mics.
And but you were measuring it with the Sound Radix timer line.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then you move.
Yeah. So my thinking there is why use Sound Radix afterwards, because to me, if I'm shifting these things in post,
sure.
Waveforms do denature. They start reflecting. They start becoming different. So I'd rather move them in space and time to a better phase relationship. And this gives me, say, 3 or 4 options, rather than thinking of, a million options from here to here.
Sure.
And I don't know if any of you have worked with student assistants when you're like, can you move that microphone forward a bit? And they're like, and you're going, can you go a little faster? And you're like, no, split the different, so there's this whole sort of language and communication that you start working out with students, which is, it's training them.
Can I ask just one more, if that's all right? What's your opinions, and what have you spoke to anybody else's opinions about in post-production time aligning the room mic to the spot mics, to the snare drum, for example, and it's an opinion that really divides producers that I've spoken with.
Well, my thinking is this. So the other thing that I like time aligning using auto line just to cheat is guitar microphones, guitar mics. So I like to use possibly 2 or 3. So I like a ribbon, and I've got like a boiled out transformer out of an SM57, so I just like it. So I put a ribbon and 57 up, and I use auto align just to get them roughly the same place. But I put them, so I've got a 4x12 cab that I like to use. I put one in the top corner, one in the bottom corner, to get as far away from each other as possible. And those 2 microphones create enough phase difference, even though they're at the same point, to create what I would consider a sense of space.
Yeah.
So to me, moving room microphones and all that sort of stuff closer, you're making a choice to remove some of the space. And I think that was really demonstrated in Andy's as well, like when he flipped down into the bottom ones, the sense of space started to disappear, everything tightened up a little and became a little cold. So again, these are choices that we're making, but are we thinking about what I want to get students thinking about as well as the consequences of these choices? And it says not right or wrong, but you're making a choice to reduce the space. Now what I like is in phase, but the microphone's in different positions. That's a personal choice, but it's in phase, but you've still got enough differentiation between the microphone positions in real physical space to create a sense of space.
Anybody else?
Great presentation, really interesting for me. This I'm thinking about working, like you said, 10,000 hours or so, might be different drums and things. I thought of it like as an intuitive process where you kind of try stuff and you don't exactly, or for me it's been like this. I don't actually keep notes
all the time.
I don't keep notes of any distances or anything, but it's
You just listen and move.
Listen and move, and then trying new things, sometimes to different mics. But what's your? Are you kind of shifting into actually doing?
Well, it depends.
science?
It depends on the situation. No, not really. I'm not really interested in the science. I'm more interested in the creative ideas.
Yeah.
But it depends on the situation. So I do a lot of location recording. I was in India last November doing location recording in an unfamiliar space with terrible monitoring, and I really I could have moved the thing and listened to it. I wouldn't have known the difference because I was in the room with the band. Like, there's nothing I could do, but it was a great vibe and everything was going really well. So I just sent the drummer out and he went off to get stoned, and I just walked up to the drum kit, did the measurements, moved the mics. It takes me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And at least I know that later on when it comes to mixing, I've just got less to deal with then.
Yeah.
So in that sense, if it's a bad monitoring environment, I'm on location, I'm in a weird room or something like that, then it's going to give me less trouble later on. That's what I like about it. Less comb filtering, less weird stuff, less splashiness, and all that sort of thing. If it's in my own studio, I like to experiment, but what I've actually been experimenting with is not doing this. It's more like I've started thinking about microphone positions that are not traditional. So, like a one overhead over here, one like underneath the drum kit.
So you're not even thinking about phase at this point?
No. So
It's already gone out the window.
So it's like taking it out of the equation a little bit and then going, well, we have these traditional mic setups because they produce certain sounds, and when I teach that, sometimes I think I'm just teaching the kids something safe to do so they don't fuck up, basically.
You give them a starting point.
Yeah, you're giving them a starting point, but I tend to find, because like I said, I've only got 4 lessons with them, I tend to find they just use the same either Glyn Johns or Recorder Man the whole time.
Do you find that the phase relationship changes with bit depths?
Yes.
The resolutions have changed and the quantization here is
Yep.
going to hit it. So
Yep. With that, EQ, I'm in EQ, just the electronic design of an EQ is, put it out of phase, shift the value, and then recouple it back in out of phase, and that's how the EQ emphasizes or de-emphasizes a frequency. To me, phase is everything in terms of how it works. But I think at the moment with this research, I've really gone down the rabbit hole. But the biggest one that I wanted to come across is to stop thinking of in phase, out of phase, and start thinking what is in between phase.
Yeah.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.